Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the Voice User Experience and Strategy podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be covering voice analytics, or conversational analytics rather. We're going to be getting into detail about what it is, how you can use it within your voice applications to understand what's working and what's not, and all that kind of stuff like that. It's going to be immensely interesting and an epic episode. We are joined today by Artem Merritt, the co-founder and CEO of Dashbot. Dashbot is a conversational analytics company. We're going to be chatting all about the platform and all about conversational analytics, which is an interesting area and an area that doesn't really seem to get a great deal of coverage, but is absolutely fundamental to making things that work. We're also joined by Dustin Coates, who is co-hosting once again, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is VUX World. Now, before we introduce today's guest, I would like to first tell you about the discussion that's happening over on the Flash Briefing. Given that this week's episode is all about voice-first analytics, I thought it would be useful to continue that discussion over on the Flash Briefing. So this week on the Flash Briefing, we are asking, how are you measuring the success of your skills, actions, or voice-first applications? How are you measuring the success of your voice first applications? Do get involved. Head to Twitter, get involved. There'll be a poll running this week. You can also head to vux.world/flash, upload your answer there. We'll play that on the Flash Briefing. Head to facebook.com/vuxworld. You can get involved there as well, and do let us know, how are you measuring the success of your voice first applications? Head to the Flash Briefing now, just ask your A-Lady to enable the VUX World Flash Briefing, or you can head to vux.world/flash. Now, without further ado, here's Artem Merritt. Artie, hello and welcome to VUX World.
Hey, thanks for having me be part of this. I really appreciate it.
Wicked. And welcome again, Dustin.
Hey, Kane. Good to be here.
Good to finally be here. God, you will not believe, boys and girls, what I've been through for the last half hour trying to make this call happen. I've updated my iMac this morning. I thought I'll do it this morning. Plenty of time. It'll give me 15 minutes when I come home. I'll just be able to set it up and get up and running. I've been working on this for 45 minutes and I've just managed to make the call. So before we begin, Dustin and Artie, apologies for the delay here, but thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it. Artie, should we kick off by hearing a little bit about yourself, and do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got to Dashbot?
Yeah, fair enough. So I'm Artem Merritt, one of the co-founders and CEO of Dashbot. My background is primarily in both mobile and analytics. I've been doing each of them for about 20 years. In fact, I had a mobile analytics company I sold to Nokia a few years back. So I've always been interested in the data and analytics side of things, and I noticed that Slack had been missing analytics. So I reached out to a good friend of mine, Jesse Hull, who we went to MIT together, and just to see what he was up to, if he wanted to explore this. And come to find out, he and our third co-founder, Dennis Yang, had been working on a Slack bot and came to similar realization that the analytics are missing. So we decided, hey, let's just join forces, build the analytics platform, and go from there. So that's how we got started.
Wicked. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Dashbot and what it is and what it does?
Yeah, fair enough. So Dashbot is an analytics platform for conversational interfaces. And by that, we mean anything that could be more text-based, like Facebook, Slack, SMS, or more voice-based, like Alexa or Google Home. So we launched about 2 years ago. We processed over 32 billion messages. Just to give you an idea of the growth rate, it took about 10 months to reach the first billion, 6 weeks the second, and now we do close to 3 billion messages a month, wow. Which is more than most whole messaging platforms. Never mind competitors or bot builders or anything like that. And then Our platform itself has like three main areas. There's what you'd think of as traditional analytics. That's, your users and sessions, retention, just, standard stuff. Where it gets much more interesting is around the conversation-specific analytics, things like the sentiment analysis, the conversation flows, AI response effectiveness, where your bot's breaking down. And then the third part is tools to take action on this data. And that's where we really try to stress here. Instead of just showing you reports, we try to provide these tools you can do something about it. So a couple of those are a live person takeover. So if the session's going sideways, the analytics identifies this. You can insert a person to help lead them through to conversion. We do broadcast messaging to re-engage users. And we also have this whole audience segmentation tool you can use to build lookalike audiences.
Wow. That's a hell of a lot in that package. Do you want to kind of break down some of that stuff for us? So you mentioned that there's the standard sort of like user session-based stuff. That's more similar to the typical kind of analytics. Are you talking kind of like number of users and frequency of use and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of table stakes analytics. I can take one step back here and just it might help. The reason why traditional analytics don't really work well for conversational interfaces or chatbots is really there's four main reasons. The first is the data. The tracking mechanisms are different. So anything that's like clickstream or event-based tracking really loses the richness of the message. There's all sorts of additional metadata inside the message that's really important. The second is the data is captured is quite different. It's all unstructured data. Users can say or send whatever they want to these devices. So it's hard, or these interfaces. It's hard to build for that. Web and mobile only have so many links and buttons there. So the third thing is the processing ends up being different. Naturally, if the tracking and data is different, processing is going to be different. But you also have multi-user sessions, asynchronous sessions. It's all a little different there. And the fourth thing is what it really leads to is new types of reports. You have things like sentiment analysis. You have the AI response effectiveness or the message funnels. So that's a big key thing there. Like just things like Google Analytics or Mixpanel don't really work well for these conversational interfaces. But those core metrics, the basic stuff is still important, right? You want to know how many repeat users you have. You want to know how much time they're spending in your chatbot. So all those things from users, sessions, time per session, messages per session, retention, the cohort analysis, like what percentage come back each day, week, month. That's all still really important stuff to know. So we show that. Where the customers get really excited, though, is around the conversational specific things. Like one of the reports we have is a message funnel. And this shows you all the messages in and out from your bot. Like you can pick a message someone says to your bot and then see what was happening beforehand, what happened after, and you can navigate the flow. So it's really useful for seeing where things might be breaking down. Like take, for example, if you built a weather bot, you might have built it just to answer the question, what's the weather in city X? But then you'd find people are asking, is it hot out? Is it raining? Do I need a jacket or an umbrella? You'd see all those messages you're missing in this message funnel and can decide whether you want to add support for that or not.
Okay. So is that what you were referring to by sentiment analysis then? What's the sentiment that people are kind of asking for?
Oh, there's sentiment too. So the sentiment is generally like the feeling they're having when they're chatting with your bot. And, for instance, if they're swearing a lot or getting mad, it's going to have a negative sentiment. Like we have a trivia. There's a trivia chatbot that we built just for demo purposes, and the sentiment's always negative. It turns out people get really upset. They don't know the answers to trivia questions, so they're swearing and everything. Yeah.
Very good. Have you had much experience just in the kind of like conversational analytics space?
A little bit. I've used Dashbot. It's really useful. It's like Artie was saying. It's with the unstructured data. It's difficult to roll that up and sometimes get a real feel for what people are looking for. And so this type of tooling that pulls it all together is just a lifesaver.
So when you're talking about that message the kind of message funnel thing, then it sounds as though everything that's kind of logged and requested and whatnot within either the chatbot or the voice application, wherever this is being applied, it sounds as though everything's kind of being logged and there for you to kind of go through. Does it kind of aggregate stuff, or is it literally you would go through? I mean, you mentioned there, what is it, 30 billion messages that you've kind of gathered. Would you have to go through each conversation separately, or does it aggregate stuff as well?
Oh no, these are aggregate. So there's both. So if you have in your chatbot, all those messages in and out are rolled up, so you get to see the most common. Like the report I was talking about, that's taking the top messages in. So what are the most common messages someone says to your bot, and then how does your bot respond? So when you're doing that navigation, there was this person, Amir Shavat. He was the dev relationship manager for Slack. He just since joined another company, but he used to present us at conferences. The first time I was surprised. I was sitting in the audience, and screenshots of our reports are up, and he described that report as the holy grail for analytics, because you can use it to improve your bot right then and there. We do also have the full transcripts, because sometimes you do want to go in and look at, get a better idea of the context, like why did someone say this, or why did they send this image, or why did they do whatever it was. You can go into the transcripts that have that occur. The other thing we started doing is clustering messages. And this gets really interesting. Like there's a women's retailer that's using us, and when you do the message clustering, two distinct audiences appear: the people that are legitimately shopping for women's clothes, and then this total other audience that's just trying to abuse the bot and get something not safe out of it.
That's interesting. I wonder how people end up finding it. Like, if it's interesting, that, isn't it? How people end up finding it to go and abuse it when it's kind of like a fashion based sort of thing, or do you reckon they just stumble across it, sort of thing?
Oh, it's a major brand. I think they're actively going after trying to abuse it. There's definitely funny stuff like that we come across. But that's stuff like part of the thing I got really excited about this whole space is that the data ends up being much richer and more actionable than, say, web and mobile, because it is unstructured, right? Like users can say, or in some platforms, send whatever they want to the bot. It's hard to build for that, but not only do they say what they want from the bot, but they do say what they think of the bot after. Sometimes that's not too pleasant, but it leads to these interesting actions you can take, like the live person takeover. If someone's getting upset, right, you can jump in and try to help them.
Okay, so the live person takeover means that you. So does that happen within Dashbot then? And is that what it sounds? Is it's somebody who would literally then start manually responding to these messages?
Yeah, you can do it right through our interface, and then it's API based, so you can integrate with other solutions too. So, for example, say somebody's trying to book a hotel and they're getting stuck. Maybe they do swear and the sentiment's going negative, or they say the same thing a couple times in a row. You can set up alerts for this. The alerts can be based on messages, like the type of message they said, the intent of the message, the sentiment, if they clicked a button. These kind of things will, in real time, send you a notification that can go to 3 different places: email, a webhook, basically an API, or Slack, and it sends along a link to that transcript, so you can jump into our interface, see the transcript, and decide whether you want to pause the bot and start chatting with the person. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow, sorry, go on, Dustin.
Oh no, I was just going to say, you mentioned jumping in on the conversation, and you mentioned earlier that you really want the data to be actionable. You want someone to have a takeaway from it. What are you seeing the best bot builders, the best voice builders, what are they doing once they get a hold of this data that you're giving them? How are they using that to improve that experience?
Yeah, so a lot of The things that we get a lot of positive feedback for is the message funnels, and there's variations of that. There's intent funnels if you're doing intents, and there's there's filters to say like what are the top exit messages and or your unhandled messages and all. The transcripts are really popular, as we have some behavior flow and conversion tracking stuff too I can mention. So a big thing is just improving the bot experience itself. That, like I mentioned with that weather example, if you set out to build a bot, it's really hard to think of all the things someone might actually say to your bot before you launch it. Like a website or an app, there's product folks that define what the use cases are and what the intents are when they make these links and buttons. Here, the users are effectively defining that for you or telling you what they want it to do or hope it does. So it's hard to build for that. So when we talk to customers, they often say they go in and look at that message funnel, see where the bot's breaking down, like what are these things people are saying that we're not yet responding to, and then they decide how they want to handle those things. So a couple examples. There's a really popular fast food delivery company that for their Facebook bot, we had this behavior flow report. We went in and there red stopping points all throughout it, like a message or two in, it was all red, and like, what the heck's going on here? And when we went and looked at what the messages are, what was happening is someone would order their food, they get really excited, they do the thumbs up, right? They're excited. That would break the bot. So that person never got their food, and then the company never got the order. And the thumbs up is one of the top 3 most common messages sent into Facebook Messenger. So they didn't have any handling of it. Not only did they not just ignore it, it actually broke the bot. So they saw that and were able to fix it. There was another Facebook bot that was basically cricket scores, and they learned a whole bunch of things. Like some of these things might sound like basic right now, but at the time they weren't. That initially they just sent out scores. So if you were a fan of a particular team, throughout the game it's sending out the scores, and that was it, follow a team. But then they saw people kept asking about players and player stats. That was what was coming through. So they decided, they would add a whole thing around that, like they would give back player stats and player info. And then the other thing they learned, which is kind of interesting, is that apparently these cricket games go on for a long time, like a day or so, or 2 days, whatever. And if you were a fan of a team that was losing, apparently these people get really upset and they would block the bot. So this company paid to acquire, they were running ads to acquire users. So they paid to acquire the user would block them, and they'd have to pay to reacquire them later on. So they learned this through the analytics, so they added a mute functionality. So if your team's losing, you can say, pause or mute, so you don't get the score updates, you don't get frustrated, and then you can unpause it when want to see the next game.
Wow, sounds like there's there's a tremendous amount of value there, isn't there? I mean, and even the one you mentioned prior to that, where you're talking about being able to send push notifications to people. So potentially not only are people and companies finding things that they haven't been able to plan for or spot beforehand, but also the ability to be able to respond to things as they happen in real time. Sounds like, 2 tremendous kind of features in it.
Yeah, well, the push notifications are kind of neat. There's a retailer that uses it not just to get people back into their chatbot, but to get them to go into the store as well. So they'll, send out messages, like effectively coupons, but you can segment the audience however you like. In their particular case, they're going after women in the U.S. So just show me the women in the U.S. that did something particular in the chatbot before. And send those guys notifications.
So how does, you mentioned there that it does things like, you could download get the hold of the full transcripts and stuff like that, and you can get kind of like sentiment analysis and intent analysis and things. How does that work on stuff like, well, Google might be different because I believe they do send full transcripts already, but how does stuff like that work on Alexa in particular?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, Alexa has one key difference from the other platforms. So with voice, even though it's voice, like a user talking to Alexa or talking to the Google Home, what the developer ends up getting is text, right? That you say, "What's the weather in San Francisco?" The developer sees that raw text, that at a high level here. So Google, if you said, I got to make sure that I'm sitting next to two of these things. If you ask Google what the weather in San Francisco is, as a developer, if that was your Google action, you would get the raw text that they said, "What's the weather?" You would get the intent is to check weather, and you would get the action to take, like look up weather, and more importantly, the context that it's San Francisco. And then said, "How about tomorrow?" It would update the context is now San Francisco the next day. Now in Alexa, it's quite a bit different. They don't give you the raw text. They just give you the intents and what they call slot parameter values. So in that case, if you said, "What's the weather in San Francisco?" as a developer, all you'd get was the intent was check weather, and the slot location equals San Francisco. So it's a little bit trickier there for developers of Alexa, and it's one of the things we get asked about all the time. And when we talk to the Alexa team, we ask them for it all the time. Can you give the raw utterance to people? And so they're kind of starting to do a little of that. With there was an announcement. It was a few days ago or so where they the unhandled events, that you can query them to get some of that. But so with intents, we get it from Alexa and Google automatically because it's part of the message. That's going back to like the differences with traditional versus conversation. The message itself, meaning the message. So sorry. The way our platform works is a copy of every message into or out from the chatbot or skill gets sent to us, and it's asynchronous. It's all asynchronous, non-blocking. And by message, I mean the full payload. So inside there's all this additional metadata. So in the case of Google, the metadata includes what the intent is and the context and all that. Other platforms don't provide it by default. Like Facebook wouldn't have. That's not part of the core, messenger platform. But if someone building a messenger bot was making use of any sort of NLP engine like Wit or Lewis or Lex or whatever, they can append that intent into the message when they send it over to us.
Tell us. Go on.
I was going to say, one of the things that we're trying to do is for the folks that don't use any NLP, since we have that large corpus of data, we're trying to figure out, can we classify some of the messages for them, even if they're not using NLP. That's where like the message clustering and that kind of thing is coming into play.
Okay.
Trying to classify messages for people.
Right. So you're essentially trying to understand what it is that's coming through, essentially.
That's what we're working towards. Because it helps for like rolling the stuff up too, right? Like this is really basic, but like hi, hey, hello, it's all the same kind of greeting. Could you just maybe roll all those up, right?
So there's two other things in there that would be interesting to cover. The first one being, you mentioned AI performance. Tell us a little bit about what that is and how that applies to the conversational analytics.
So it's a bit of like the NLP, a little bit of the intents mapping, and then the message flows. So there's message flows, the message funnels. There's also an intent version of that, like going by the intent. So you can see, like I'll use the weather example again. Like you would see all the you're looking at the intents, and someone said like, do I need a jacket? That one wouldn't map to any intent. You'd have like your unknown or unhandled intent picking up that, so you can say, all right, I should go back and add support for that. But there's actually, someone could say, I'm thinking of buying a jacket. What's the weather in San Francisco? Then there's two different use cases there, and what we're actually matching on. So you would see that in the intent flows what the person said, what response you gave back, and were your intents mapped properly or not. And you can go back into your intent engine or NLP engine and make improvements around those. So we have a special one for unhandled too. Like if you're I don't know, an error messages kind of thing, like we can show you those.
And what about, so all of this kind of stuff, a lot of it tends to, by the sounds of things, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a lot of things in there that are similar to the more traditional kind of analytics or number of users and things like that. Then we've got a lot more stuff that is kind of conversational specific, and we chatted about the message funnels and things like that, sentiment analysis and stuff. And then you did mention in between all of that there's something in there, conversion tracking. How does that sort of work and hang together?
Oh yeah, there's a couple reports we have for that. So one is goal funnels, so you can track different steps someone makes it through. Like, say they're ordering food. Do they start the order? They play they open the bot, started the order, they checked out, or they started the hotel booking, like those kind of things. So there's a whole goal funnel there to track if the people are making it through the different steps. There's a behavior flow report which just shows like visually all the paths through your bot really quickly, and where there's drop off and abandonment, that's where like the there's like, if you see this visually, there's these red markers all over the place where that's happening, and you can hover over and see the paths. We just added a new one which is effectively conversation flows. Imagine like a tree-like structure where you just keep expanding the nodes. You have your start node, and then you click that, and there's like 4 paths people go, and you keep clicking, and you'll see the same like red endpoints there. We added this back into the message funnels too, where there's a report that filters just on the exit messages. So what was the last message, and you can look at what happened right before that. We also have, there's a couple other things that fit into all this. What a big selling point of our platform is that we are cross-platform. We work with any conversational interface. So we have what we call a cross-channel report. So you can see how all your bots compare against each other on basic metrics, sessions, users, engagement, retention, those kind of things. And so this is really useful if say you're building for multiple platforms. Like we have one customer that they're on 7 different platforms, so they can see how their Facebook versus SMS and Alexa, how they all compare the usage. And then we have agencies that build for multiple clients, so they can see how those clients compare, like, company X versus company Y, like how their data. So that's all that. And then we do have, this full-on comparison metrics. So we have 3 comparison reports. You can see how your bot or skill compares to others on the platform based on the number of users, the number of messages, and the retention rate. So we don't expose like who, it doesn't say like, this is how you compare against, CNN or something like that, but it's like, this is how your Facebook bot compares to all the other Facebook bots we're tracking based on the number of users, like what percentile are you in? So that's stuff that people, like the benchmarking, I like to see.
We will be right back with Artie Merritt in just one moment, but first I thought I'd take the opportunity to tell you about the Smart Voice Summit London. It's on the 21st of June. It's put together by Smartly AI. If any of you, you've probably come across Smartly AI. They're an extremely influential and really innovative company, voice-first company in France. They put together the Smart Voice Summit Paris at the start of the year, and I've heard such good things about it. I didn't make it myself. I was stricken ill, unfortunately. But from what I hear, it was an amazing event, and they're set to repeat that trend in London on the 21st of June. The lineup of speakers is absolutely unbelievable. We have Max Amor-Deluso, who is the EU Chief Alexa Evangelist at Amazon, Charles Cadbury of Dazzle, Sina Carhen of Vase, Dominic Meisner of 169 Labs, Ben Sauer of Clearleft, and a whole host more. If you are interested in this space and you want to know what the voice first revolution means for you and your business or your career, get yourself to the Smart Voice Summit. It's going to be an amazing event. Yours truly will be hosting the event as well, which I'm absolutely buzzing with. Cannot wait for it. It's on the 21st of June. It's in London, and all you need to do is head to smartvoicesummit.com and you can find out all about it there, and you can get your tickets there as well. Looking forward to seeing you there. Now, without further ado, let's get back to Artie Merritt. Is there any, have you come across any sort of blatant differences between all of those different platforms? Let's say somebody's got an Alexa skill, a Google Action, and a Facebook kind of bot, and then maybe it's a Slack bot. Is there anything that you've come across where there is stark differences between the two platforms?
There is. So we're trying to be neutral Switzerland in all this. we want to be friends with all the platforms. Yeah. So there's. The reason why I asked that is just to try and see if there's any techniques or things that were learned from that people can then apply to then use that to sort of develop better sort of bots. So you don't have to sort of call people out on it. Just in general, if there's any differences that you've kind of come across. Oh, yeah. So the where we publish most of the data, like a lot of the data we publish is around Facebook, because it's like the big behemoth there, and there's so many Facebook developers and all this kind of stuff. So like on our blog, we'll say these are the most common messages users send to bots, or this is like average retention rates, or those kind of things. So we share all that stuff. Yeah. So some of the things that we've like shared with folks to help build better bots on that platform. When you publish the most common messages, like this might sound basic, but do you know what the most common message sent to a Facebook chatbot is?
Oh, I don't know. What do you reckon, Dustin?
I would have to reckon it's an emoji or a sticker of some sort.
It's actually just hi and hello, right? Like think of it like any conversation, you start with some sort of greeting. So the hi and hello are, and the thumbs up are the top three, but generally hi and hello go back and forth. But the funny thing is, a lot of bots still don't support that. Like the last time I pulled the data around this, like 50% of the bots don't respond with anything appropriate to hi or hello. In fact, we had a meetup a while back where someone in the audience said, because one of the speakers was a consultant helping people build better bots. So he said, hey, can you look at my bot? Give me feedback. So we pulled up the bot, and the very first thing I did was type in hi, and it said, I have no idea what you're asking, right? Like that was so that's kind of an eye-opener for people. The images is also like the stickers, like the thumbs up is basically a sticker. I mentioned like the company that wasn't even handling those. Some folks are surprised that users are sending images in. It turns out some set of folks treat the bots as if they're their friends. So like friends, you would send images, so they send images to the bot too. The other things like there's messages like stop. I think it's 60% of bots don't respond to that, and that's what people getting upset, right? They want to block the bot, so they end up blocking you. That was like the Cricket example where they added mute instead of being blocked. The other one that we published a while back that was kind of funny was around the images, like looking deeper into what people send. So we ran a bunch of the images through an image recognition library. And do you know the most common image people send to chatbots or Facebook chatbots?
The most common image. It must be some sort of GIF or GIF, however you want to say that word. I'm gonna put this out there. All right, you can take it or leave it. I'm gonna say Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air doing his Tom Jones dance. What about you, Dustin?
What about selfies? Would selfies be up there?
Yeah, selfies is the number one. Yeah, that's it. So, it's funny because like selfies are like when we first did it, I thought it was going to be like a totally different go a totally different direction. But selfies were the most common, and what was interesting with Facebook, you can separate. Well, we can see male versus female. So with guys, selfies are still most common on both. But guys, you start seeing images of cars, vehicles, motorcycles. But then women still heavily skewed to selfies. But there was one that showed up in the top 20 or so of tags, and it was electronics. And I was thinking, why are women taking photos of electronics? And do you know why that might be?
Why would women be taking photos of electronics?
Well, turns out it's when you do the selfie in the mirror would capture the phone, and this thing tagged the phone as electronics. So that was really
right.
And then the crazy thing is, people do send not safe for work selfies to these, and luckily it's a really low percentage. It's like 2% of the images, and like 1% of users. But the funny thing is, when folks do it, they do it a lot. Like, a normal image is sent in on average once. One of these like naked selfies is sent in on average 5 times. So there's some weird hurdle you get over where you feel it's comfortable to do. You just keep doing it. And like we pulled, I think this is 2 months worth of data or a month's worth of data when we did it. One guy sent his same naked selfie 266 times.
What, to different bots or to the same bot?
Sometimes repeat to the same bot, but mostly to different bots. So it's just really bizarre, and it's to a bot. It's not to a person.
Yeah, that is absolutely mental. I thought when I first said that, I thought you were saying that they'd send it to the same bot, like they'd send it and be like, "Did you get that? Here's another one." Mad. That is class. Okay, sorry, go on.
And what are you seeing on the voice side? What are people asking for most often there?
So voice is a little bit. We haven't rolled the stuff up. That's as much. It's partly I was saying we publish a lot of the Facebook stuff just because there's so much more there. And then with Alexa and Google, because Alexa, you don't get the raw text, you just get intent. So it's hard to do the comparison between the two. Like other metrics, like usage-wise, like session lengths and how many users and all that stuff we see. But we're trying to, like I said, that one's we're trying to be neutral Switzerland in this, so we haven't really published stuff there. The thing that we started doing is monitoring the Alexa skills store and publishing like movements of the skills, like which ones are new ones that are starting to get a lot of more ratings and. We actually have a competitive intelligence product around that too. Like if you have an Alexa skill, this is all free. You can go to our site and see how your Alexa skill compares to other Alexa skills just based on the store ratings.
And real quick, for developers, what does it take to implement Dashbot?
Oh, it's all meant to be self-service. So you go to the website and sign up with the email address. So the website's dashbot.io. You sign up with the email address and password, and you add a bot, which basically like pick whatever platform you're building for, Alexa, Facebook, whatever, and you get a little key, and then you use that key inside our documentation. So most of these bots and skills are written in Node.js. So we have an NPM module. But if you're in a different language, there's a REST API, and we do have some for like Python and Ruby up there. But excuse me. So what I mentioned, what was happening is like a copy of every message in or out gets sent to us, and it's asynchronous and non-blocking. So what that means is the integration is actually really easy. It's just a couple lines of code if you're using our NPM. So in the case of Alexa, it's 2 lines of code. You include our module, and then you replace a method inside your Alexa skill. Google Actions, 2 lines of code, include our module, pass the assistant object to us. Facebook, if you use the NPM module, it's 3 lines of code. You include the module, you log the incoming message, you log the outgoing message. There's actually a completely codeless solution for Facebook. If Facebook allows multiple webhooks to be attached to a page, so you can have your business logic attached, and then you add us to it too in a completely codeless fashion. All the other platforms are similar, like Twitter, Kik, SMS. It's just a few lines of code, and then there's the REST API as well if you want to do something else. So it's meant to be really easy to get up and running. And while it is self-service, we're here to help if people have questions. So folks email in and we try to help them.
Cool. And then two final questions, and then we'll kind of let you go. I know that we've kind of overrun slightly. Two final questions. We've mentioned some of the challenges on Alexa's side. What are some of the other challenges around conversational analytics, specifically in the voice space?
Yeah, so with voice, so it's similar to the other ones. It's hard to know what people are going to say to these things. But when you're designing for voice, there's some things to keep in mind to be shorter and concise. I find this. For example, we built a little demo Google Action for Dashbot, and if someone was to ask me, describe Dashbot in an email, I'd send one or two sentences, and then I put that in the Google Action, and you'd say, "Tell me about Dashbot," and 3 or 4 words into it, like, "Oh my God, this is too long." Stop, right? And I think that's part of it. What we found from talking to agencies and brands building for voice, what they often do is try to act it out first. Like, someone is Alexa and somebody is the user, and just read these things back and forth and say, is this too long? Does this actually work? So that's something to keep in mind when designing, to make it things a little bit more concise. And there's some companies that build tools to try to help with this. Like there's one called SaySpring that Adobe acquired, where it was just mocking up those flows. The other things, like for discoverability, we've got this from both brands and agencies. Like anything, the thing that drives the most, it tends to be some form of social media, whether that's paid or organic. And sometimes having video influencers can help, because people might not know how to interact with the skill or the bot yet. One of the things we heard that worked really well for a voice skill was the people that built it went into Reddit and posted all the Easter eggs they'd hidden inside the skill, and that got people to go and try it, and engagement went up that way. But sorry, rambling. So for voice, it's really to test those flows. Is it, are people before launching it, test the back and forth to try to keep things concise, and then monitor that to see if people responding and they dropping off. What are some of the other things? To constantly monitor those the intent mappings to see what are people saying? Are they actually mapping to your intents? Are they coming up with new use cases there, because it is all unstructured? We did some things like I shouldn't say a lot, but some set of voice skills include some sort of audio file. Either they're using a custom voice or they're playing some sort of recording. So we added a way to track the length of that in the session, which is helpful. I think the last, keep things within voice. There was a company, or a startup, I should say. The person built this game, and I was chatting with them, and they asked me to help them with some stuff they saw in the analytics at one point. And then I just was curious how things were going, so I went in and saw that all the inbound, it was all inbound messages, just one message and done. No one was interacting with the Google Action, and this is really surprising. And I asked him, is something wrong? Is something going wrong? He's like, no, that's fine. And when I went and looked, what was happening is it was a game, and when you'd say, I don't want this to go off, but if you ask Google, play XYZ game, the very first thing it said is, go to www, blah, 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 sign up here and do this. So they're kicking the person over to a website immediately, and that's just the person's in voice. You should be able to do this stuff. Thanks, right?
No way. That is critical. I can't believe that. I'd be interested to have a look at that. Final question then, last one. What thinking about the future, what do you, then again, specifically in the kind of voice space, what data do you wish you could get at that you currently can't, or what data that's not currently available do you think would add a great deal of value to Dashbot and conversational analytics in general?
So on the Alexa side, getting the raw utterances would be nice. If it was possible to actually hear the audio, because you could start to figure out, it's sort of sentiment a bit. Words at the tip of my tongue, but basically, someone saying this to Alexa in a stressful way or in a relaxed way, like you get a bit more context if you actually got the audio, would be nice. Some device information, like not all these platforms give you this. You know that they're using Alexa, but you don't necessarily know, are they, Echo Show or which device they're actually using, like, or even the location, like. When you set them up, you can say like, hey, this is the one in my kitchen or not. Like that kind of stuff, it could be actually really interesting. We're big believers in voice. Like we think that this is the future. If you think of all those videos of 2-year-old kids swiping the iPhone and the iPad, they knew how to interact. The same exact things happening with devices like Alexa and Google Home. Like kids already know how to interact. Jesse, my co-founder, has 2 little kids, and they run up and say, Alexa, play Star Wars, Alexa, play Happy Dance. They know that interaction. So this is definitely the way things are going, the voice side of things. And that's where we see all the brands coming now. I think before we started, I mentioned when we first reached out to brands, it was primarily Facebook first, but it's shifting quite a bit that it's voice first quite often. So anything that helps us with that, the raw utterances, perhaps the voice itself, some of the device information, location information, things that they're not quite providing yet would be, and then there's there's a couple of attribution too. Like it's really hard to know how someone got to your Alexa skill. Like say you ran a Facebook ad to tell people about your Alexa skill, how would you know they actually used your skill? Or what if I am using one skill and it says something that triggers me to use another skill? Like you're using, I don't know, just like maybe that you ask the question about some sort of food item, and then next thing you know, you're like, well, let me ask this recipe skill for how to make something with that. Knowing that referral and attribution would be really useful.
Wicked. Artie, thank you very, very much for joining us. Much appreciate that. Where can people find out more about Dashbot or get up and running with Dashbot and find out more about yourself?
So it's the website's dashbot.io. So all the links to Twitter and Facebook and everything are there. I have Twitter just as my full name, Artie Merritt, so ARTEMERRITT at Twitter. But yeah, it's meant to be self-serve and free. Just go in, sign up, and should be up and running pretty quickly.
That was Artie Merritt. Appreciate Artie taking the time to speak to us there. That was an interesting podcast. Loads of stuff in that I'd never even come across before. There's some similarities in terms of the typical website analytics from, for example, Google Analytics or whatever, but so much in there that is totally unique to conversational analytics. I mean, plenty in there about sort of dashbots. I suppose that's kind of where most of the conversations are happening these days, but equally I think a lot of the content we covered there is equally applicable to voice first and voice only interactions. And as the voice first scene expands and grows and more skills are available and actions are available and people are using them more often, and as those features get rolled out, I'm sure that Dashbot will be all over it. So interesting to see what they're up to, interesting to find out all about that. So yeah, if you're interested in Dashbot, if you want to kind of run that on any of your skills or applications, then do visit the website. I'll put the website link in the show notes, as well as the blog. It sounds as though they publish a lot of interesting stuff on the blog in terms of some of the data that they gather, and also obviously the links to the social channels and all that sort of stuff. So do check it out. Thank you again, Artie, for joining us, and thank you, Dustin, for co-hosting, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, see you later.